Dividends, distribution of profits to shareholders. When the corporation distributes profits to shareholders, this distributed profit we call it dividends. يعني توزيعات الأرباح للمساهمين. توزيعات الأرباح للمساهمين في الشركات المساهمة بنسميها dividends. We have two types of dividends, cash dividends or stock dividends. Cash dividends, from the name, it's distributing profits in the form of cash to shareholders, giving cash. Stock dividends means distribute profits as extra shares, giving extra shares to shareholders instead of giving them cash. توزيع الأرباح ممكن يكون في شكل فلوس كاش نقدية، توزيعات أرباح نقدية، بمعنى إن الشركة بتوزع الأرباح في شكل كاش، أو بدل ما تديهم كاش تديهم أسهم زيادة، توزع عليهم أسهم كتوزيع للأرباح. Requirements for dividends distribution، يعني الشروط اللي لازم تكون موجودة عشان يحصل توزيع للأرباح. Cash dividends or stock dividends, both of them are having requirements. For the cash dividends, the first requirement for payment of cash dividends is having retained earnings. You remember that we said before that all the profits realized by the stock corporation is put in the retained earnings, added to the retained earnings account in a credit balance of retained earnings. We must have credit balance of retained earnings enough to distribute dividends, and this requirement is for both cash dividends and stock dividends. يعني توافر الأرباح المحتجزة في الشركة شرط أساسي عشان ينفع نوزع أرباح، سواء كانت cash dividends أو stock dividends. الاتنين هيتوزعوا من الأرباح المحتجزة. لو هوزع cash dividends, we must have adequate cash position. The corporation must have enough cash, large amount of cash, to be able to distribute cash dividends. If the corporation will be distributing stock dividends, then we need to have unissued shares authorized. To be able to distribute extra shares, we must have authorized unissued shares، يعني عدد من الأسهم مش مصدر ومتاح للإصدار. Both of them, cash dividends and stock dividends, require dividend declaration by the board of directors. The board of directors need to declare dividend declaration here and also dividend declaration here for the stock dividends. Stock dividends require approval by stockholders. Representing at least 2/3 of the stockholders must approve the stock dividends. يعني لازم يكون في اعتراف من أو موافقة من الشير هولدرز عشان يحصل stock dividends، ولازم يكون الموافقة ده في حدود 2/3 من الستوك هولدرز. الديفيدنس ديت، أول date, the most important date of declaration, in which the board of directors decide to distribute profits to shareholders. Whether it's cash dividends or stock dividends, we have requirement of declaration. When the board of directors declare distribution of profit, now it's a liability on the corporation. We create a liability payable on the corporation to the shareholders. That's why we need to prepare a journal entry on date of declaration of the dividends to record the liability. And in the same time, this amount of dividends to be distributed will be deducted from the retained earnings by debiting the retained earnings account. You know, the retained earnings account is credit in case of profits. So when we distribute from it, we use from the profit, it needs to be debited. and the payable is always recorded as credit. So on date of declaration, we debit the retained earnings and we credit the liability. The liability is created as soon as the board of directors declares the distribution of dividends. Date of record, just preparing list of names of the owners of stocks who's going to receive the dividends, and it needs no journal entry on that date. And when you are given the date of record, you don't need to prepare a journal entry on that date. Ex-dividend date, it's 2 or 3 days before the date of record, in which the stockholders are asked not to sell their shares at this period of time. Date of payment, in which the dividends cash is paid or the stocks distributed in case of stock dividends. And on date of payment, we need to prepare a journal entry to record the payment of the cash and closing the liability in case of cash dividends, and or the distribution of the stocks and closing the liability also in case of stock dividends. So we can say that we need to prepare 2 journal entries, one on date of declaration and another one on date of payment. We go to the solved example, and we have actually 2 examples, but I put them on one slide so that you can see the difference. You can compare between having cash dividends or having stock dividends. For the cash dividends, he says a corporation's board of directors declares cash dividends of 2 LE per share on 100,000 shares of common stocks outstanding, payable on July 10 to stockholders of record June 20. And remember, we said no journal entry on date of record. Then the amount to be paid to shareholders is 100,000, which is the number of shares who deserve to get the dividends, multiplied by the cash to be given for each share. 2 times 100,000 equal 200,000. For the stock dividends, it's as a percentage from the stocks receiving the shares. He says 10%. And we are having outstanding shares. Outstanding shares means the shares that is going to receive the dividends. 100,000 shares. The par value of the share, the original par value of the share is 5 LE for the common stock. With market value, that's the market value of the share, the market price of the share, 22 LE per share. And the shares is distributable on July 10 to stockholders of record on June 20. Also, again, we are not preparing a journal entry on the date of record. Then you need to multiply 100,000 shares, that's the number of shares deserving to get the dividends, multiplied by 10%, that's the percentage declared by the board of directors to be given to shareholders. You get 10,000, that's the number of extra shares to be distributed to shareholders as dividends. These 10,000 shares will be multiplied by the market price to know the market value of the share. The market price is 22 times 10,000, number of extra shares will be 220,000. Here we can see the 2 examples. That's the case of cash dividends. It's very simple. Just on date of declaration, debit retained earnings, credit dividends payable by the amount declared to be paid to shareholders, which was the number of stocks multiplied by the cash to be distributed, 100,000 times 2. On date of payment, just you close the liability. Dividends payable was credit because it was a liability. Now closing the liability, it goes to the debit side. And it was paid cash, so cash is credit. That's for the example of cash dividends. In case of stock dividends, we have 2 journal entries also. One on date of declaration and the other one on date of payment. On date of declaration, retained earnings is debited by the market value of the shares. multiplying the market value of the shares, 22, the price, times 100,000 of shares, we are getting 220, sorry, times 10,000, the extra shares, only the extra shares, multiplied by the market price of the shares. So 22 LE multiplied by 10,000 shares. In the credit side, stock dividends to be distributed, calculated according to the par value, which is 5 LE per share multiplied by the extra shares. So we are having stock dividends to be distributed. The difference between the two sides, as usual, additional paid in capital stock dividends. So you subtract 220,000 minus 50,000, you get 170,000 additional paid in capital. It's the same as the issuance of shares. But instead of collecting cash from shareholders, we are getting the money from the retained earnings. We are debiting the retained earnings for the value of the shares to be issued to shareholders as extra shares, as dividends, as stock dividends. That's on date of declaration. On date of payment, we have stock dividends to be distributed debited. It was the liability in the credit side on date of declaration. On date of payment, it's debited to close the liability. That's on distribution. And credit, common stock capital. Now these extra shares were issued as capital, as issued capital.